Hello, everyone, and welcome to our lecture on an introduction to HTML. These slides I specifically created for my CIS 1400 course, Web Design 1. Though if you are watching this video in another course, these topics still apply. So some of the things we'll talk about in the slides real quick here are HTML basics. We'll look at semantic markup, we'll look at lists, and we'll look at special characters. So let's start by looking at what is HTML. Well, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And HTML basically provides the structure and meaning of web pages. And in addition to HTML, we have two other things, CSS and JavaScript. HTML actually works with both of them. CSS provides the style of web pages or the design of web pages, and JavaScript will create the interaction on web pages. And it's important to know that every web page is built with HTML. So here we can take a look at basic HTML structure. And I have some example code that I have put into the PowerPoint presentation here. This is the basic structure of most web pages. Pretty much all web pages will have these elements at least in their web page for it to be considered a web page. Obviously, web pages get a lot bigger than this. This is just basically the framework that you could use to begin creating web pages. And obviously, with my CIS 1400 students for Web Design 1, we currently are working with Adobe's Dreamweaver. So you may not be actually typing code, but it is important to understand what the code looks like and what it means. So right here up at the top, we can see that in our angle braces are the less than and greater than sign. We have specified the doc type as HTML. And what this does is it tells the browser that this document is HTML. Next, we have HTML tags. So each of these little things in the code here that are within angle braces are called tags or elements. And we have a opening tag and a closing tag, right, for our HTML. So we put all of our HTML within the HTML element. And then it's important to remember that every HTML element has a head and a body. And the head is for page info, and the body would be for the visible content on the page, right? So if we're working with CSS or JavaScript as well, within the head element is where we would actually link to our JavaScript files or our CSS files that we have for our web page. So again, the head contains page info, and you can see that we have opening and closing tags. And here is a title element. And this will be what is displayed in the browser for your web page. So you can see here that we have an opening and closing tag of title. And the name of our web page is My First Page. And it's important to note, since I didn't touch on it before, but the closing tag will always have a slash at the beginning of it to designate that it is the closing tag. And then the body element, this is our visible content in the page, so it would include things like our heading 1 or our paragraph, but it's not limited to those things, and we'll see that as we continue to go through this course and explore more web development like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So a heading 1 here, it's very similar to like a heading 1 we would have at the top of my PowerPoint presentation here, but it just says hello world. And then the paragraph element is used for text. So in this case, in between our two paragraph tags, we said, this is my first web page. And this is just a very basic look at basic HTML structure. And it is good to know because anytime you are coding HTML, this will kind of be the foundation that you start with for your web pages. And since we were talking about headings and paragraphs, we should look at them a bit deeper for a second here. So headings can range from H1 to H6, or heading 1 to heading 6, right? H1 would be the largest of the bunch. If you've worked in Microsoft Word, for example, then you've used different size headings before. So heading 1 is the largest, and heading 6 would be the smallest. It's also important to note that you can go further than H6, but they will be the same size, right? So if I typed in a tag and I typed H8, then it would be the same size as H6. So you can continue upwards in the numbers from 6, but they will all be the same size as H6. And obviously, heading size doesn't matter too much because that is something that we can actually edit with CSS, which we'll learn about a bit more as the course continues on. But it's just important to note now that when we work with headings on the page, we should make sure to use the correct headings based on what we're working with, right? For my PowerPoint presentation here, for headings and paragraphs, I wouldn't use H6 as the heading for the PowerPoint slide. I would use H1. And you can apply this logic to web pages, right? You want your HTML documents to be semantically correct, which basically just means that we are making the page more readable and accessible, and also having correct semantics, right? When we speak or write in the English language, we start with a subject and then a verb, but so that's semantically correct, right? If we were to be semantically incorrect, if I had a sentence like the dog ran after the stick, you could be semantically incorrect by saying after the stick ran the dog, right? That's just not how we structure our language, right? And that is basically a quick definition of semantics for you. So how you structure HTML is very important. And then we also have paragraphs, and paragraphs should be contained within the P element. And the example that I've provided here, you can see in between our paragraph opening tag and closing tag, I've just shown you that this is where you type whatever information you'd like to display. So now we can move on to look at semantic markup. Remember, we talked about semantics just a second ago. And HTML provides multiple semantic tags. And these tags describe meaning and improve accessibility of a website for screen readers and also things like search engine optimization. And some examples of semantic HTML tags include, but are not limited to, header, nav, section, article, and footer. And these are not the only semantic HTML tags, but these tags are used in the place of the div element. The div element is kind of just a catch-all container in HTML, but it's not very semantically correct. So we try to avoid using div where possible, where a different semantic HTML element may be more appropriate. So for our header, header is best used for the top of a web page, right? We have a header, which would be the top of the main page. Then we have main is another semantic HTML element. And we would use main for the main content of the web page. And then footer down here at the bottom, actually, you can see would be the bottom of our web page. And that's where we would include things like maybe a contact us or copyright, things like that. We also have the nav element. Semantically, this would be used for anything that would provide navigation or navigation links. We have the section element. This is used for grouped content and could be used to replace the div element. And then we also have article, and article could be used for standalone content. So these are just some of the semantic elements and tags that we have with HTML. There are plenty more, which I believe the book even goes into a little bit more depth if you're in my CIS 1400 course. But yeah, just take a look at these, and also in the course text, be sure to be on the lookout for other semantic HTML tags, as it is important to prioritize using proper semantic markup. Now we can take a look at hyperlinks. So we use the anchor tag to create links on our web pages. So here I have a couple examples of the anchor tag in use. We have the opening anchor tag right here. And href is actually called an attribute. So inside of our HTML tags, we can have attributes, and these attributes will be assigned something, right? So our href attribute in our top example is assigned about.html. And then what we've put between the opening and closing tag of our anchor element is about us. And this is actually, if you were on a web page, it would be what you click on to get to about.html. And then in our bottom example right here, we have our href attribute set to www.google.com. And again, between the opening and closing tag, we have the word Google. And Google is what we would click on in order to be redirected to www.google.com, right? So these are two different ways that we can actually use links within our HTML and our web pages. And also take note of the fact that we can have links to files within our project. That would be about.html. And these are called relative links. And we can also have links to full web addresses. And these are called absolute links, such as our www.google.com here. We also can have email links. And I've provided an example of that here. So our href attribute is set to mail to : and then an email address. And then the text for it is email us. So we could click email us. And what will actually happen is that when we click on email us in the web page, mail to will open up the user's email client, and we would be sending mail to the specified email address in the HTML. And this type of scenario would best be used for contact pages whenever a website has like a contact us section and they have like an email listed or like a phone number listed. This could be a way to use the mail to email link. Now we can take a look at lists, and there are two types of lists in HTML. We have unordered lists and ordered lists. So an unordered list, the tag to specify an unordered list would be UL in angle braces, and it has opening and closing tags. And here you can see that any list item, which is what LI stands for, needs to be designated in its own opening and closing tags. So here we have an unordered list, and then our list items are apples and oranges. And the way an unordered list would be displayed would actually be with bullet points, because it doesn't actually matter what order the elements are in the list. On the contrary, the ordered list would be used with the OL element instead of UL for ordered list. And they also need list items. And you can see that I've provided an example of step 1 and step 2. And that's because ordered lists would be numbered lists. So if you need to think about it in a certain way to get it stuck in your head, an unordered list would be a bulleted list, and a ordered list would be a numbered list, because there is a certain order that you complete or list the items. Now we can take a look at special characters. So in HTML, there are many characters that need codes in order to be shown. So here I've provided a few examples of some of these special characters. So ampersand copy with a semicolon at the end would create the copyright symbol. Ampersand AMP with a semicolon at the end would create the ampersand. Ampersand LT with a semicolon would create the less than symbol, right? So LT stands for less than. Ampersand GT or greater than semicolon would create the greater than symbol. And these are just a few of the characters that you would need to type something specific in the code to be able to show them. And using special characters is useful for things like trademarks, copyright, as we showed up here, multiple different symbols, or accented letters. And it's important before we wrap up to just discuss quickly HTML best practices, right? So we touched on it a little bit already, but it is very much a best practice to use semantic tags for meaning over only using the div element. Remember, the div element is a non-semantic HTML element that is kind of just a container. And before we had semantic elements, everything would kind of just be in div elements. But now that we have semantic elements and tags, we should try to include those semantic tags in our code for better accessibility on our web page, but also to have better meaning behind our code. It's also important we should try to keep file names lowercase and with no spaces. This is just a convention for HTML, so I would recommend any file names, keep them lowercase and don't use spaces. You could use a dash instead of spaces for your file names. And also, whenever you are creating a link within your code, you should always test the link to make sure that it is valid. You don't want any dead links in your web page. So just test all of the links and make sure that they are valid. So to summarize just everything we've talked about really quickly for you all, HTML is the structure of the web. And in later videos, I'll discuss CSS, which is the style behind our web pages, and JavaScript, which would be the interaction and functionality a little bit behind some of our web pages. And semantic markup makes content meaningful and accessible. And also lists, links, and special characters are building blocks of HTML. And that'll actually do it for our slide deck. It's a little bit of a shorter lecture, but I just wanted to go over a few of the things that we cover in our CIS 1400 course. And for those who may not be in the CIS 1400 course, but I've provided this video for another course, I hope that some of these things discussed today in the slide deck were helpful to kind of get a better understanding of. But that'll be all for this lecture video, and I will see you guys in the next one.